Hey guys, this is Derek Abikinari, and I'm going to talk about something that I would argue in this era of political, social, and moral sensitivity is of tremendous urge for discussion. The topic of are the universal truth, universal notions of morality, universal notions of politics, universal notions of economic. Does the word truth imply to these domains of discourse? Can we, as a community or a global civilization, have a coherent account of truth? And it might feel like the subject is truly undefined and seemingly perpetually open to be reconstrued. How can there be an objective notion of truth that is guiding and binding, irrespective of all cultures and institutions? One purpose of this video is to give the following contention: intellectual and empirical and strategic support with corroborating evidence. And such contention follows from the idea that science can give us a foundation for morality. So this is an argument disseminated and espoused by philosopher and neuroscientist Sam Harris. At first, I shall describe his arguments, his description of this theory, a science of human morality. And continuing those contentions, I will offer my own critiques and view about such theory of Sam Harris and what are the implications in our discourse. First being that when we think about moral truth, we're often between the schism of religious people, religious demagogues, those who believe that religion is the true foundation for morality, or those well-educated, secular, liberal, educated people who think there is no truth, that truth is subjective, it's culturally created. And Sam Harris, what he tries to do is to ground a universal account of morality that is neither religious nor liberally, culturally relative, but is based on two fundamental properties. So he begins his book, The Moral Landscape, by talking about how the distinction between science and values is a false distinction. The distinction between fact and values is a false dichotomy, and how it's often thought that values have to deal with meaning and purpose and significance, and science, as a descriptive domain, can't answer questions of meaning and purpose and value. So Sam Harris's aim is to jettison this claim that science, which deals with facts, and values, which deals with meaning, are distinct entities. The goal, one goal is that, and in doing so, he argues that values reduce to certain kind of facts. And what he means by that is that even if you think that compulsory whaling of women in Afghanistan or Taliban, that's a value description, and he describes how the world is in terms of political strategy. But Sam Harris's aim is to argue that values are a property of facts. What he means by that is that think of a universe completely devoid of consciousness. Think of a universe completely made up of rocks. In that universe, nothing would matter. For the changes in the universe to matter, they have to matter within the context of experience and human minds and some locus of identity and experience. So his fundamental unit of analysis is the idea of consciousness. So Sam Harris begins his book, How Science Can Determine Human Values, by arguing that the fundamental property of the universe is consciousness. And as soon as we admit that consciousness is all that matters, then the question becomes, how do we best organize ourselves in this universe in such a way that the primary goal of morality should be to maximize the well-being of conscious creatures as long as we can. And the only philosophical bedrock granted is to avoid the worst possible misery for the highest amount of people for as long as we can. And that is his argument. He says that culturally relative and moral relative arguments of morality which say that morality is subjective, dismiss this notion of universal morality. And Sam Harris's aim in his book, The Moral Landscape, is to offer a ground for morality that is binding and universal. How does he do that? By two arguments. First, consciousness, and secondly, the well-being and maximization of conscious well-being for conscious creatures. And how does he do that? Well, he begins by saying that in order to talk about values and facts, we have to start with certain assumptions and presuppositions. First, someone has to value logic and evidence. If someone doesn't value logic and evidence, what logical argument are you invoke to prove they should value it? If someone doesn't value logic, what logical argument are you going to provide to show the importance of logic? So Sam Harris argues that even the most basic scientific statements, such as water is 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen, we can't have a discussion about that without adhering to the value of reason and honesty and evidence and parsimony and intellectual honesty. And the aim for him is to offer a universal account of morality in which first we as a global civilization admit that we have to be concerned with facts. We have to be concerned with value. And as soon as we admit that, then we can look at the fundamental property of the universe, which is consciousness. And the fact becomes that the well-being and the extent to which conscious agency in society could thrive could be the best way to organize ourselves. And this could be understood within the context of sociology, economics, politics, history, and neuroscience. So well-being and morality is reducible to the experience of conscious systems. So questions of meaning and purpose and value and significance emerge out of the experience that is part of the laws of nature. The human brain is part of the physical universe, and whatever gives rise to conscious experience, the well-being and the protection, the preservation of those experiences should be the fundamental unit of well-being. And the goal for him is to create a bridge in which the better part of humanity can cross, and we as a global civilization can come together as communities and create the best society. And we can do that by being honest with ourselves. And in the